If you feel like the truth is being kept from us, know that you're not alone. I'm Detective Ozma, and my mission is to dig up the evidence behind the mysteries they want to bury. Tonight, I'm opening a file that refuses to stay closed, not because of what was captured on radar or confirmed by governments, but because the witnesses were children, and their story never faded. This case happened in Zimbabwe. On the morning of September 16, 1994, at a small rural school near the town of Ruwa, something extraordinary disrupted an ordinary recess in a way that would echo for decades. More than 60 children claimed they watched a silver object descend silently from the sky, landing just beyond the school fence, close enough for them to see it clearly, yet far enough to feel unreachable. According to their accounts, small beings emerged from the object, darkly dressed, thin-limbed, with disproportionately large eyes, and what followed was not a brief flash or a distant sighting, but an encounter that lasted several minutes, in full daylight. No adults witnessed it. No physical evidence was ever recovered. And no official explanation ever followed. What began as a playground incident became one of the most debated and enduring UFO cases in history, not because of military jets or classified documents, but because the witnesses grew up, and never changed their story. When I opened this file, one thing became clear: this is not just a UFO report, it is a case study in memory, fear, belief, and the possibility that something truly anomalous happened in front of children who had no reason to lie. Evidence 1, a sky already on edge. 2 days before the incident, residents across southern Africa reported intense lights crossing the night sky, described as a blazing fireball that dominated headlines and conversations alike. Astronomers later attributed the phenomenon to the re-entry of a rocket stage breaking apart in the atmosphere, but by then the damage was done. The idea that something unusual was happening above had already settled into the public imagination. And that context matters, because when people are already watching the sky, a single unexplained moment can take on a life of its own, blurring the line between perception and interpretation. Evidence 2, the recess encounter. Late morning. Recess time. While teachers were inside attending a meeting, the children were alone in the schoolyard when several of them noticed something descending beyond the fence, described consistently as metallic, disc-shaped, and completely silent. They claimed the object landed among trees and scrubland, and moments later, 1 to 4 small figures appeared, moving deliberately, not running, not floating, but walking. Some children panicked and ran. Others froze where they stood. A few watched, transfixed. What stands out is not just what they saw, but how they described the interaction. Many said the beings did not speak, yet communicated through eye contact, as if thoughts and images were being pushed directly into their minds. Several children independently recalled receiving warnings about pollution, environmental destruction, and humanity's growing dependence on technology, themes that would later become central to the case and deeply controversial among investigators. The encounter, by most accounts, lasted around 15 minutes, after which the beings returned to the object, which lifted off rapidly and vanished without sound.
We were playing down over there on the log.
Yeah?
And then we saw something shiny, so we all ran down over there.
And it was in the early morning?
It was at break time.
Yeah?
And then we saw something shiny. And we saw two people. They were in black, tight black suit. And they had big eyes. And we didn't actually see their nose, but it was quite small. And their mouth was quite small as well. One of them was running in slow motion up across the ship. And the other one was standing beside the ship.
Evidence 3, the absence of adults. When recess ended, the children rushed back to their classrooms, speaking over one another, frightened and excited, insisting on what they had seen. The teachers, having witnessed nothing themselves, dismissed the story as imagination, assuming it was either a shared fantasy or a game that had spiraled out of control. But that explanation began to fracture when the children went home and repeated the same account to their parents, many of whom reported their kids were visibly shaken, not playful or amused. By the following day, parents were calling the school in large numbers, demanding answers, and the story moved beyond the playground into the public sphere.
Where the spaceship had landed, all the the insects and ants and stuff like that were all dead, and there was a huge black mark there. And my mum said it might have just been a fire there, but I don't think there was. I think it was the alien ship.
Yeah, but you have gone to the place, of course, and have you seen anything?
No, we weren't allowed
An
there.
evidence, I mean, that it was there?
Some other people came to the school and they went out the boundary of the playground and they went to go and see what had happened there, and they saw that the grass was burnt and all the living things had died there in that area.
Evidence 4, media attention and an uncomfortable pattern. Within days, the case attracted national attention, and a BBC correspondent arrived to document what was happening. What he found was unsettling, not because it confirmed extraterrestrial involvement, but because children of different ages, cultures, and backgrounds were describing the same core elements with remarkable consistency, often struggling emotionally as they tried to explain what they experienced. The journalist later admitted that covering war zones had felt easier than trying to process what these children were saying, because there was no obvious framework into which their testimony neatly fit. Evidence 5, the drawings and the details. Zimbabwean UFO researcher Cynthia Hind arrived shortly after and conducted structured interviews, separating children into small groups and asking them to draw what they saw. The drawings varied in style, as expected, but shared recurring features: disc-shaped objects, dark humanoid figures, and oversized eyes. Crucially, the interpretations differed based on cultural background. Some children associated the beings with extraterrestrials, others with figures from local folklore, yet the visual descriptions remained strikingly similar. Different explanations, same imagery. Evidence 6, the psychiatrist from Harvard. Months later, the case reached an international audience when Dr. John Mack, a Harvard psychiatrist known for studying anomalous experiences, traveled to Zimbabwe to interview the children himself. Mack concluded that the children were sincere, that they genuinely believed they had experienced something real, and that their emotional responses did not resemble those of kids inventing a story for attention. However, his involvement also deepened the controversy, as critics argued that repeated interviews and leading questions may have shaped how the children remembered and articulated the event over time. What emerged was a difficult question with no easy answer. Even if the children were honest, were they recalling a literal encounter, or a shared narrative that evolved as memory, suggestion, and meaning intertwined? Evidence 7, decades later, the story fractures. As the children grew into adults, the story did not disappear. Instead, it resurfaced in documentaries, interviews, and academic discussions, with many witnesses maintaining the same account decades later, insisting the experience shaped their lives in profound ways. Then, in 2023, one former student publicly claimed the entire incident had been fabricated as a prank, a confession that reignited global debate and appeared, at first glance, to offer a clean resolution. But that resolution collapsed under scrutiny, as other witnesses strongly rejected the claim, insisting they saw the beings up close, and noting inconsistencies between this confession and the accuser's earlier statements about the event. One voice changed, dozens did not. Two paths, one unanswered question. As I close this file, two paths remain. One suggests a rare convergence of psychological factors, a community primed by earlier sightings, children exposed to cultural imagery, fears spreading rapidly, and memories reshaped over time into a powerful shared narrative. The other path is more unsettling, proposing that a group of children encountered something genuinely anomalous in broad daylight, something physical enough to be remembered with clarity, yet elusive enough to leave no trace behind. So the question that refuses to fade is this: what did those children actually see beyond that fence? Was it a prank that escalated beyond control, a complex psychological event unfolding collectively, or a misidentified phenomenon so unusual that even decades later, it still resists explanation? The Zimbabwean authorities offered no conclusion. Science offered probabilities, not certainty. And history recorded the silence. The Ariel School Incident remains unsolved, suspended between skepticism and belief, a reminder that some mysteries endure not because we refuse to answer them, but because the answers refuse to settle. I'm Detective Ozma, and I'll keep gathering every fragment, every voice, every piece of evidence they try to erase. Many stories get buried, but never forever. If you, or someone you know, has ever witnessed something unexplainable, leave your story in the comments. Or, if you'd rather stay anonymous, send it to the email pinned in the comments. Who knows, maybe the next file I open will be yours.